Welcome to the Archive Room podcast.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Fastamai, I'm Judith Lay, and I'm very pleased to find you waiting for me at the door to the Archive Room, the place where we keep stories of island life in years gone by, told by the people who were there. So come on in, sit down and make yourself comfortable, and let's listen to this week's selection. On last week's programme, we met Dr. Alexander Cannon, a medical doctor with a passion for magic. Some might say a lethal combination. He wasn't Manx, but fell in love with the island when first he visited, and eventually, in 1943, made his home at Lauriston Manor House on Ballaquail Road here in Douglas. Here he ran a lucrative private clinic specialising in the treatment of nervous diseases, using a combination of exotic remedies, hypnotherapy and psychic mediums. And alongside it, a place to indulge his obsession with magic, the Enchanted Hall. Last week we heard first-hand accounts from people who'd actually been in the Enchanted Hall, telling of Dr. Cannon's attempts at some spectacular magic, much of which seems to have marked him down as a brilliant showman, but maybe not such a very skilled magician. But the shows were undoubtedly very entertaining and very popular with the select audiences invited to watch them. But I also said last week that there were some even more surprising stories linked to Dr. Cannon's death, and that's where we're starting this programme. Margaret Jones knew Dr. Cannon. She remembers the distinctive black cloak that he wore and his rather superior attitude. After Dr. Cannon's death, the entire contents of Lauriston Manor House was auctioned, and Margaret had a ringside seat, as she now explains to David Collister.
When he died, all his artefacts were sold, and crystals, the auctioneers on the island, they had the sale there, and it was all used in the Enchanted Hall. All his possessions were all put out in the hall there.
You went to that, didn't you?
I did. I went for the 3 days, from morning till night, as it were. Enjoyed it. I bought a few artefacts there. He had ivories, beautiful ivories. Boats with figures in and that. Well, I don't know about today because ivory is a bit of an naughty
today
word.
You couldn't do it, could you?
No.
But I mean, it was perfectly legal to take it anywhere in that.
Yes.
When the sale was on, though,
yes.
which we haven't made clear yet,
no,
there was a lot of dealers there, wasn't there?
A lot of English dealers. First time I'd ever seen English dealers in the Isle of Man. But of course, it was such a tremendous house that everything in it, you might say, was antique. And all these antique dealers had come from all over. Yeah. And they'd even put like a grandstand in the Enchanted Hall to accommodate everyone to sit. Must have been about 6 or 7 rows on this platform. And this fellow came in and asked could he sit by me, then asked me lots of questions, was I local and all that kind of thing. And he said, would you mind if I sat with you? Would you tell me all about the Isle of Man? And I told him about the Isle of Man. Mm-hmm. And he bought all the ivories. Oh. Eventually, as they came up, he bought all the ivories.
How much would he have paid for them?
£5,000 worth of ivories it was.
Yeah.
And even at lunchtime, he walked up the drive with me and he asked me where he could go for lunch. I think I directed him to the Villa Marina, because that cafe in the villa was open then and it was just down the road virtually. And off he went, and he came back in the afternoon. I think most of the ivories were sold in the afternoon, but he'd already asked Crystals could he have them earlier because he wanted to go on the plane. So he paid for the ivories, got the ivories, and I think he must have gone in a taxi because he didn't have a car of his own. Off he went, but they got suspicious, I believe, and they rang the bank to see if the cheque was okay, and it wasn't. Of course, the cheque was nothing. And the next thing was they sent the police after him, and they got him at Ronaldsway Airport. They got all the ivories back and they just let him go, because I don't think Crystals wanted the publicity, you know. And I believe the ivories weren't sold in the Isle of Man thereafter. They were sold in London, probably at Sotheby's or somewhere like that. They wouldn't have lost on any of it. It was just the mess, really, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But he'd come here, special.
Do a dirty deal,
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
But, I mean, all these dealers, as you say, came over, and there was a lot of them.
Oh,
but
yes.
did local people buy much of these?
Oh, yes, yes. I bought his letter scales. They were a cherub. They were bronze ormolu. They were French, and the weight went along a bar at the top. There was a little basket of birds, and that was the weight. And the bar at the cross was all marked off for the price of postage. Now, these scales were about 1840, early postal days.
Yeah.
Anyway, they were beautiful. I paid £50 for them then.
That's a lot of money then, wasn't
A
it?
lot of money, yeah. And the dealer bid me up on it. I think it started at about £10. And when I got it for £50, this dealer shouted across the room to me, "Sorry, love," because he'd bid me up, you see, and he didn't want to bid me up really, but he apologised,
Right,
yes.
yeah.
But it was a lot of money in those days. But they're lovely though, really.
What about local antique dealers? Did they buy any?
Yes, Mrs. Ken at Peel, she's now in Australia. She bought all the witchcraft artifacts. There was a lady there with 6 arms, and there was like a shriveled man. It was, I don't know what it was really, but it was like a shriveled man. They were all horrible. You wouldn't have had them in your house really. But anyway, she thought she'd buy them because they were unusual. And she had a side window at her shop in Peel, and a nice side window, and she'd done the side window out with all these artefacts. And within a few days, a woman came into her shop, and she just arrived in the Isle of Man. It must have been after lunch. I don't know how she got to the Isle of Man, probably by boat. And she had a job getting to Olive Ken's. She didn't know her way or anything. She had to ask her way. And she came in and she said, "You've got a whole lot of artefacts from Dr. Cannon's." And Olive said, "Yes, they're in that side window." She said, "I want to buy certain ones of it." And Olive said, "Yes, they're all in the window there." And she said, "Dr. Cannon came to me last night. I live," and it was somewhere in the south of England. I don't know where, but somewhere in the south of England. And he came to me and told me to go to the Isle of Man and buy all these certain artifacts and leave the others because they were evil.
Yeah.
The others.
That's a bit spooky, isn't it?
It is a bit spooky. I'll tell you, Olive Ken was as nervous as anything for days after. And anyway, she bought them. She left the shop, was leaving the island back the way she came, never seen again. And it really frightened Olive.
Yeah.
It did, yes.
And that story from Margaret Jones is the perfect introduction to another story from someone else we first met last week. Barbara Wiseman's father was a piano tuner by profession, but was also quite interested in what you might describe as the mechanics of magic. He was a regular visitor to the Enchanted Hall and often repaired some of the equipment Dr. Cannon used in his magic act. Barbara Wiseman remembers going to the Enchanted Hall with her father, but also remembers very clearly what happened at Dr. Cannon's funeral. In this conversation, you'll hear Barbara mention someone called Rhonda. She was one of Dr. Cannon's 2 attendants. They'd started life as Joyce and Eleanor Robson from the northeast of England, but changed their names to Joyce de Rhonda and Rhonda de Rhonda and moved over to the island around 1937 to work with Dr. Cannon. He added to their air of mystery by giving each the title Dame of St. Hubert. Now, Barbara Wiseman takes up the story.
Well, after the funeral, Rhonda asked me if I would mind taking a photograph or cinefilm of the flowers, which I did after everybody had moved away. I filmed all the floral tributes outside, and there was a little bit of film left. So I thought, well, I'll use it up for something. So I thought, well, interior of the church. I went in and I started panning round, and as I looked, say, to the left, I saw this very, very blinding bright light. And I thought, oh, this is going to spoil the film. And so I panned further round the church, and this light appeared again further round. And I thought, oh, well, that film, it won't be any good. But anyway, it was sent up to be processed to Kodak like you had to do then. When it came back, it was projected. It was like an opaque outline of a figure, a portly tummy, and it finished just below the knees. Now, when this was projected and Rhonda saw it, first thing she said was, oh, my goodness, it's the doctor. And, of course, he'd had his legs amputated before, below the knees. Of course, it wasn't my film, so I left it with her, so I don't know what happened to it. But somebody said it was going to be forwarded up to the Institute for Psychic Research, and that's all I know about it. But it was uncanny, really. It did look exactly like the doctor.
Could it have been tampered with later or not?
Oh, I don't think so, because it came back to me through the post from Kodak. But I saw it, and it was shown down to Rhonda. But as I asked from there, I don't know who got it.
That's a very eerie story, isn't it?
I suppose it is, really. I could go on about this bright lights, which I've seen. I've seen it twice before, actually. As I said, my father was the organist at St Barnabas Church, old St Barnabas, if you remember that. And I used to go in to wait for him when he was rehearsing, practising the organ. And I'd sit down in what were the choir stalls. And there was this very bright ball of light, and it used to move along. My mother's seen this as well. It used to move along the balcony behind the pillars, so it wasn't shining in from outside. And it used to settle in the middle of my father's back at the organ.
Really?
And he said, oh yes, he says, I know there's something or somebody there. And we took no notice of it, because he says it's not nasty, there's nothing frightening about it. And then one time he was coming out of the church, and he turned round, he said there was an old man there with a long grey beard. And they'd been doing some alterations to the font in St Barnabas. So he explained to this old man about what they'd been doing. And he said, well, I'm sorry, I'll have to go now. And he went ahead and opened the door to let the old man out, and he wasn't there.
So was your father a bit psychic then?
I think he must have been, yes. Yeah. And we heard afterwards that there was a ghost at St Barnabas Church, and it was one of the old church wardens. And there were several people who used to go to St Barnabas, wouldn't go in that church on their own or in the dark.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah. You haven't taken any of these gifts on, have you?
No. A bit frightened too.
And now, let's go shopping. This is going to be a trip to Parliament Street in Ramsey, and hopefully might also be a trip down memory lane for you, if you have memories of Ramsey in the year 2000, when this conversation between Marjorie Quayle and David Collister was recorded. Born Marjorie Carouche in 1911, here's Marjorie talking to David about a new business venture that she began in Ramsey in 1946, soon after her husband Albert came back from the war and her sister was just about to come out of the Wrens. So come on, let's go into Quayle and Carouche.
I was in the shop with my sister, Georgie. Well, she was Carouche at the time, but she got married after. She's Mrs. Farragut now, but she was Carouche then, so we went under Quayle and Carouche.
Quayle and Carouche, and where was that shop?
72 Parliament Street, where the pet shop is now in Ramsey. That's where we were. We were there for 26 years.
So had your parents had it at first?
No. We bought.
So you went into yourselves?
Yes, well, after Albert came back from the war, property belonged to the Mrs. Rowell, the Rowell boys' mother, and we bought it off them in the end, the property. Yeah. But we were in, as I say, in there for 26 years.
So what did you sell there then?
We took it from the man the name of Taylor. He only made bread and perhaps a few jam tarts and things, because he had no sugar ration, that we had to fight for those when we first went in to get them from the government to give us rations.
You were able to get rations to...
Yes, we did get rations and made bread for a while, but it was too heavy for the bit that we were selling in a small shop and a small bakehouse. So we quit the bread and we just made pies and pasties and tarts and custard, and soda bread was one of the big things we made, and slab cake.
So did you do a lot of the cooking yourself?
Yes, but we're both confectioners. Georgie and I were both confectioners.
Where did you train for that then?
I trained in the Single E Cafe, which was the place next to Morton the Grocer's now.
Yeah.
And my sister trained with Stevenson's over at the end of the street where that Lloyd Jones took it after, and now it's a photography shop or something on the end of the street.
Right.
She trained there with the Stevenson's girls.
So, do you have competition? Was there other cake shops around?
Oh yes, there was quite a lot. Spenny Kelly was in one across the road from us.
How were you going to be sure you'd make it pay and make it work?
Well, we just took the chance. Oh, I don't know how much it was. The fellow that was in, it wasn't very much because we hadn't any much money when he was in the war. He just came back. Georgie was in the Wrens at the time, and I just wrote to her and told her that we were going to take this place and for her to come home because she was coming out. Like,
where would you get the meat for your pies and pasties?
we used to get it from George Quayle, the butcher's, and then Ernie Jocken took it over. We always bought the best of meat. A lot of the places used to mix bread in with the meat to make it go further, but we never did. We always used the meat and just put the meat in.
It must have been more difficult, though, starting up in the war time.
Yes, well, it was just like after the war, you see.
Because it was rationing for everybody.
Oh, yes. But we eventually got a sugar allocation and we got a dried egg allocation, which was a great thing because we always had dried egg in this slab cake that we made, and it makes it much different. I make it even today, that slab cake. Not the same if you make it with all fresh eggs. The dried egg makes it moister. And we had people that used to come over on holiday and they used to leave us money. They'd say, in a month's time, will you send us another slab cake? And we had another traveller, and his wife used to come from down Port Erin. He was on travelling for one thing and she was for another, and she used to always buy slab cake and she used to leave money, and we used to put it on the bus and send it down to her.
What's in the slab cake then? What's
like a fruit cake, just flour and sultanas. It was only sultanas that was in it in those days, and cherries, a few cherries in it and that. But it was a very popular thing, and the soda cakes were popular. And we went to Ireland on a holiday Albert and I, for 1 week, and the place we stayed for our breakfast, she used to give us what they called a fowl, and it was made with brown flour and bran, and it was gorgeous. And she used to fry some of it on the pan for our breakfast in the morning, and we used to get a breakfast. We didn't want any dinner at dinner time. It used to last till night. And anyway, when we came home, I thought, I'm going to have a go at this, and I experimented with this. It turned out really good, and in fact, the governor and his wife used to come down to Ramsey occasionally on a Saturday afternoon, and they always used to come and buy this fowl that we had and soda cakes.
Was that Governor Garvey, was it?
Yes, Ross Ronald Garvey. Yes, he used to come and buy this fowl. They liked it very much.
So, but you must have worked half the night to get this stuff ready for the next morning.
Well, we used to have to start when we first went in because we were making the bread, and we started about 4:30 in the morning.
Wow.
But anyway, when we cut that out, we used to start about 6. But then we had a girl in the shop as well, and then we had another girl with us in the bakehouse, a young apprentice in the bakehouse. But we had this girl and the one girl in the shop, and things didn't work out. Anyway, we decided that I'd have to come into the shop myself, and my sister would carry on in the bakehouse with the girl there, because my sister had to go home to look after my mother and father at the time. But anyway, then she came back to the bakehouse after.
You'd have to make a whole stack of meat pies, sausage rolls, things like
yes,
that.
trays of them we used to have, and then we had a hot cupboard thing in the shop, like a little electric thing. We used to keep them hot, and the pasties and sausage rolls, and all the workers used to come in the morning for their lunch, for the pies and pasties. And
And what's the secret of a good meat pie then?
Well, I don't know what it was. We just made them ordinary as we had done when I'd served me time, really, but we used to thin all the pastry out. We used to handle each pie separately. After we'd blocked it, we used to spread it all out with our hands to make it thin. You didn't get all that thick, hard pastry. And then, of course, the lids were very fine, and we blocked the top on, and it was always had the good meat in. And
meat and potatoes in them?
In the pies, we had the meat pies, but the pasties had meat and potatoes and onion in them. I must say we did have a good name for our pies and pasties. We perhaps didn't make as much money as what some of them did because, well, one person in particular, he was in business, and if he found that we had ours slightly cheaper than his, he used to come and tell us about it. So I said, oh, well, you run your place and I'll run mine. Neither of us, we didn't believe in rogan people, you know. As I say, we could have made more probably if we'd have put less of the good stuff in it, even our fats and everything. We always put the best fats in. and everything, whereas some of them didn't. They'd come and borrow of us. Although we were the smallest place in Ramsey, they used to come and borrow boxes of fat, and then the first they'd bring us back was some of this cheaper stuff, and we found out what it was. So anyway, and the thing was then we wouldn't let them have it unless they paid for it, or else give us the same brand back again. Yes.
Did they have inspectors in those days?
Yes,
shops?
you did, yes. Because after when we'd been in a few years, we applied to sell ice cream. They wouldn't let us sell ice cream in the shop, the loose ice cream, because we hadn't a sink in the shop. But we could have the containers and the little tubs.
Yes.
And we were the first in Ramsey to get Felice's ice cream. We had all Felice's ice cream.
When you had your 60th wedding anniversary, the picture in the paper you showed me, it shows quite a row of other products on sale in the shop then.
Well, we had sweets and chocolates.
Oh, did you?
Yes, we sold sweets and chocolates. Gradually, as we got going on our feet, we expanded a bit more. We went in there in 1946 and we retired in 1973.
Memories of quail and carouche and mouth-watering pies and pasties, not to mention the slab cake, in a conversation recorded in the year 2000. David also talked to Marjorie's husband Albert, and you're going to love his tales of working in the 1922 TT races when he was a 12-year-old. We'll hear that when Albert Quayle joins us later in the series. But now, just before we have episode 4 of our Archive Room serial, I want to introduce you to Cecil Mitchell. Cecil was 95 when David recorded this conversation, but Cecil has crystal clear memories of a long and interesting life that included buying and restoring that popular Sunday school destination, Silverdale. But that's a story for another time, because Cecil was born in 1905 and we need to get a bit of family background. Cecil is a Yorkshireman born into several generations of blacksmiths who then began working for the coal mine when it opened nearby, until Cecil's great-grandfather made a big decision.
Why work for the pit? I'll buy the pit, which he did. Unfortunately, it blew up in the end, but he'd started a new pit and it was traded under the Mitchell Main until the Coal Board took it over at the end of the Second War.
But Cecil kept well away from the pit, and when he was just 10 years old, moved to the island to become a boarder at King William's College. This was a condition of a complicated family trust set up by Cecil's great-grandfather that said that the remainder of the family inheritance was to pass to the eldest grandson of his 2 sons, which was Cecil.
But it was run as a family trust and trustees, and in their wisdom they said I should have to go to a boarding school. All these schools with fancy dress, that's not what I want. They said, well, what about, they'd had a man, that the father went there, and we had 3 uncles in time. We had to wear a black jacket and striped trousers for Sunday. Yeah. So I thought, well, that's about the best I can do, so I settled for that. Also, it was going to be interesting because I'd get a sea trip to get there. And I'd been assured by my mother that there would be no chance at half term, wherever I was, for them coming to see me. So I might as well be on the island. So anyway, it was on Friday, the 8th of October 1915, when I found myself on the two-funnel Tinwold. And what a shock I got. Junior house, there were about 40 boys. They were nearly all brainless. Now, when I was young, I saved up to get roller skates. I could go, the furthest I went was about 2 miles each way in roller skates on the pavements and things. I had a Meccano set and a little joiner set, but they never did anything at all. All they did was punch each other, more or less. That's all they could do. And I thought, well, this brainless lot. But anyway.
They weren't your kind then?
No. Well, put it this way, we were just ordinary, but these were all higher up. One thing I couldn't understand was why the housemaster's wife, when she came into lunch, put a hat on. What did they dig into that? It's not raining in here. But that was a different world.
How did you get on at the college?
I got a school certificate in the end. I wasn't really worried about anything because I knew in the end I'd probably have enough cash in hand to keep myself going. Wouldn't be hard up.
Now we're going to leave Cecil there with his school certificate from King William's College and the sure knowledge that, thanks to the family trust, he would never be short of money. Remember also that sea crossing on the two-funnelled Tinwold in 1915, because that's going to be so important in the life of Cecil Mitchell when we meet him again as a young man. And now, Episode 4 of our Archive Room serial, The Little Dark Cupboard. The serialisation of a play for radio broadcast 50 years ago with a cast drawn from the island's drama groups of that time. Later in the series, I'll give you their names, but just for now, see if you can recognise these well-known voices as we return to the sitting room of an isolated house in a remote corner of Dartmoor, where Bill and Eva have taken refuge after getting lost in dense fog and conveniently finding the door of the house open. Eva is terrified of confined spaces, a fear that stems from being accidentally locked in an understairs cupboard when she was a child and staying at her aunt's house. She was rescued by a kindly gardener working there, but it's left its scars. Just as Bill and Eva are starting to wonder who owns the house and why the door might have been left open in the first place, a mysterious stranger comes in. We don't discover her name, but we do get 3 vital bits of information. She hates hikers, a black mark for Bill and Eva. The currently missing lady of the house, Alison Reethy, is a well-known artist, and a convict has broken out of a working party from Dartmoor prison and is on the run somewhere. The nameless caller seems to be more displeased with Bill and Eva than worried about the convict on the loose, and goes on her way to buy some eggs.
Oh, God. What one might describe as quite a character, eh?
Well, I warn you. Wild horses wouldn't drag me away from the chance of meeting Alison Reethy.
You can spare the wild horses, I fancy, dear. Dartmoor's doing us proud. First it brews up a genuine homegrown fog, and then turns an escaped convict loose on us. I wonder if they've nabbed the blighter yet. I can't think why they even tried on, can you?
It's just what I'd do myself if ever I was shut up in a tiny cell. I'd have to try to get away. I'd have to, Bill.
Oh, I don't know. Clink these days isn't what it used to be.
Oh, if they sleep on swan's down and eat of gold plate, they're not free. That's the horror of it. They're not free.
Of course not. So long as there's crime, there's got to be punishment. And prison seems to be the most commonsensical way. They're put away for a time with the chance that they may be taught to mend their naughty ways. Oh, damn it all, Eva, what would you do with them? Fling wide the gates and let them all come?
I don't know, Bill. I don't know. It's just that I can't bear the thought of it somehow. Oh, I know, of course, they've got to be punished. I know that. But I suppose we've all of us got our pet horrors, and that just happens to be mine. Just think of it. To hear the door clang to and to know that you're trapped. Oh, I couldn't bear it, Bill. I just couldn't. I think I should die.
Now, that's enough now. Stop gibbering. I tell you what, let's go out into the porch and smoke a cigarette, eh?
Out there?
You coming?
Well...
You're not still afraid of the fog, Bogey?
Well, we won't walk out into it, will we? I don't think I'd like to do that.
We won't stir a single step from the porch, I promise. Now, come on.
Oh, it's okay, Bill. I'll get the lighter. Oh, I didn't know you were in the house. Oh, gosh, I'm so sorry. Whatever must you be thinking? You're Captain Reethy, aren't you? Have you been in the house all the time? Oh, dear. Oh, I'm afraid I've took an awful liberty. Well, my husband and I barging in like this, but you see there's such a dreadful fog and, well, we simply couldn't resist your open door. My husband's out there on the porch. We went out to have a smoke and I came back in for the lighter. They're in his haversack. May I call him? Oh, Bill! Bill, do come, please. Captain Reethy's here. Oh, Bill, there you are. This is...
But just who is it? Find out next Thursday in the 5th episode of The Little Dark Cupboard, the serialisation of a play for radio recorded and broadcast on Manx Radio 50 years ago, with a cast drawn from the island's drama groups of the time. Later in the series, I'll give you all their names. And as well as the serial, I'll have more memories from great characters of island life to share with you when we meet at the archive room door at the same time, 5:30, next Thursday evening. But for now, let's turn off the lights and close the door. I'm Judith Lay saying thank you for listening and wishing you a very good evening.